Welcome to the Strategic Pursuit Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Macias, and today we got a special guest. His name is Adam Theodorou. Adam, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Adam, let's talk a little bit about how you got started and how you got to this point in your journey.
All right, absolutely. I'll give you the Coles notes because it's a long story. It spans over 30 years, but I was a competitive hockey player growing up, playing up to junior level in college here in Canada. And with that, I felt a passion for fitness as I was going through my hockey career, ended up going to school and studying the sports science, sports medicine. That ultimately got me out into the working world with the understanding of the science behind exercise, behind fitness, behind sport, and obviously wanting to own my own company, coming from a long line of entrepreneurs. My grandfather was an entrepreneur, my dad was one. So it was just natural that I wanted to own my own facility. And so with that degree in exercise science, went off and worked and managed a personal training team coming out of college in the early 2000s. Realized that this was at a big box gym that obviously had memberships and personal training. And back then, personal training was a very small portion of what was happening in gyms. But that being said, it was a very different type of client that went out and spent at the time $50, $60, $70 an hour to have a coach instruct them through a guided fitness program versus the person that was spending $30 a month or $40 a month in the early 2000s for a gym membership. And so I would be with clients and realizing that clients no longer wanted to wait for equipment from, maybe a younger person that's sitting there and having a social event. And so them spending, double what that person was spending a month in that hour ended up to me coming up with the idea that, well, a personal training client needs to be serviced differently than a gym membership client. And so in 2003, I went off on my own. I opened my first private training studio in Markham, Ontario. Named the company Fit Studios. And we went from a 2,300 square foot facility with just myself as the only and main coach to a 4,500 square foot facility in about 2.5 to 3 years and having 5 coaches on staff. Realizing the demands as the industry grew and as what we were doing as trainers with the private one-on-one and custom programming, there was a demand for group exercise as well as athletic development, which is kind of always my passion is working with athletes, working with my obviously hockey players, being a hockey player, but all spectrum of athletes, and went down that road and then ultimately required more space to do this. If athletes were coming in, whether it be in a team environment or small group, adults wanted to come in, and this is when the boot camp craze really hit hard in 2006, 2007. We needed more space. And so in 2010, we upgraded to a 15,000 square foot facility to which we could house athletic development, hockey teams, soccer teams, basketball teams, tennis players, golfers. We could house group exercise classes and put 30 to 40 people in a room and do a HIIT style of training with these people at one time. And obviously still have room for the private bespoke custom training program for the one-on-one and semi-private training. And that took us out to 2020.
2020. Okay. Now, we know what happened in 2020. COVID hit. This industry got impacted significantly. So, up until that point, you're a professional in that industry, right? That was fitness, training people. You grew up in that. That was something that you had a passion for. Now, with that continued success leading up to 2018, what was your plan? Did you always have a plan in mind where we were just going to continue to grow, or was this just, let's just see where this takes us and maybe we'll open 10 facilities?
So well, let's just see where this takes us, gets you nowhere real fast. We should always have a crystal clear vision and a direction of travel. We always knew that originally when I started out, and especially as we started scaling and growing and things really took off from, really 2010 onwards, the intention was either to scale it and have multiple locations and or exit and obviously get paid out for the work that's been put in over the last 15 or so years. And so as of 2018, we made a decision. My wife was now obviously front and center with me working in the facility. I was no longer servicing clients. 2018, I took myself off the floor after, over 20 years of servicing individuals and had a staff, about 22, 23 coaches, and then contract workers. We had about 10 or 12 of those, upwards of 18 at one point. And we decided to scale the company as much as we could in a laneway of about 18 to 24 months with the purpose to sell it. And so that was 2018. The numbers at the time were better than we'd ever imagined. Things were going really well. The industry was, paying dividends in terms of the effort that we'd been put in. We were hyper scaling with a very unique approach that I had developed over the last 15 years to train and service people better than any other facility around. And one of the biggest, loopholes in this whole industry is that it's a very easy barrier to entry. So it doesn't take much for someone to go out and get certified as a coach. And if it doesn't take much, how much education and understanding and experience and whatnot does that individual have? And so the industry itself has been very diluted with underqualified, undereducated, underexperienced people that are interested in the industry, but really don't possess the raw tools to help other people, and especially at the rates that they charge. And so our big claim to fame was hiring and executing a rigorous training methodology so we could allow trainer A through X, regardless of who it was, we knew that they were going to deliver a premium service to our client following a very structured plan that we had developed over the last 10 to 15 years ourselves. And then, so the plan was 2018, scale it as much as we could for the next 18, 24 months, and then try to find a suitor.
So how did that look like? Let's talk a little bit about that. What was the plan for 2018 to be able to sell? Was it focusing in on the numbers, the bottom line? What was it?
So numbers are always going to be important, and it was secondary. And in service industry, you're only as good as your last service. And so I always said this as I was hiring my coaches, and I always ask someone, because most people have gone for a massage in their life, right? And so if you went for a massage and it was your very first massage, and you went in with whatever preconceived notion you thought you were going to get out of the massage, and you left it, and it was either uncomfortable or it was or it didn't really do anything to push the needle. It didn't help fix anything. And then you really didn't come out with any feeling about it. Chances are you're never going to go back to that particular individual for a massage. However, if you went in, again, blank slate, not really expecting much, and then the performance of that person that orchestrated the service to you blew your mind in terms of how they made you feel, issues that were going on that they helped start to fix. You started feeling better, and it was legitimately, you were convinced that itself helped you move forward with whatever the reason was you were going there. Probably a pretty good chance you're going to go back to that person for more help, right? And so that's something everyone can relate to, because I'm pretty sure everyone's had a great massage and everyone's had a bad massage. And so we as service providers, whether you're going for hair, whether you're going for nails, or whether you're going to see your personal trainer, you have to make sure that the people delivering the service are representing your brand to the standard that you want or that you did as the primary owner way back when you started. So the level of service is what I took a step back to ensure that I could hire and train the right individuals that would not only get on board with the culture of what I've created. And so in 2018, what I did is I took a step back from servicing clients and solely worked on the hiring and training of these new coaches that were coming on board, that would not only be advocates of the program, that would buy into the culture, that understood what we were trying to do and wanted to grow and learn and develop themselves. And so ultimately pouring into them with what I had learned over the last 15 years allowed them to be better coaches, allowed them to get, increase their education and understand really the ins and outs of servicing a client, which isn't always just understanding how to execute a squat or a deadlift or how to design a program. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. If the average human is going to spend 2 to 3 hours with a coach, you not only have to believe and trust that they have the raw tools to create a program and help you get from point A to point B, but you also have to enjoy the time. And so your personalities need to be more like a chameleon as you're going from personality type A and versus personality type B versus personality type C, all in a span of 3 hours. And so that was all part of my coaching strategy for the coaches. And so I would develop the coaches over the next 18 months to 2 years to make sure that they were delivering a branded product for Fit Studios, so that when I did go to sell it, you weren't buying my business from me. You weren't buying Adam Theodorou training and wellness. You're buying Fit Studios, which has a brand of facilitators that all service to a certain spec. And so that's really was our cup of tea, because coming out of a service industry, if I'm the main servicer, how is someone going to buy my business if I'm the one who's delivering all the service? I need to make sure that everyone else is able to deliver that service, and I'm just running the company at this point. And so in doing so, you get referrals, you build organically, and then ultimately your numbers at the end of the day start increasing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you start working on your business, not in your business.
That must have been a big pivot, right? Because you were always on the floor. I mean, prior to that, you were always, the one that was training these people, coming up, real hands-on approach. Now you're taking a leadership approach and you're creating these principles, these outlines, this model that everybody had to follow. That must have taken a lot of leadership and a real pivot on your end. But how did that look like as far as employees go at that point? How much did it grow?
So when we started that, like I said, when we got into the bigger facility, we probably went from our 5 coaches that we had and very slowly grew. We probably added 3 or 5 coaches. So let's just say we're somewhere at 10. And by the time we were done, we had 22 or 23 between part-time and full-time coaches. We had a chiropractor, a registered massage therapist, and a physiotherapist. And we also had, I believe, upwards of 18 contract coaches. So those were people that would come and utilize the space and be a hybrid, whether they were servicing our clients and or their own. And so we probably doubled in that 18 months in terms of what we were doing in terms of a revenue perspective.
That's great. Now, let's get into the ugly a little bit. COVID hit. How did that look like? How bad was the hit?
So December of 2019, we had our largest revenue month to date. So again, the company was created in 2003. So it was our largest revenue since inception. January was the same thing, upward trend. Again, we beat December's numbers. February of 2020, we beat January's and December's numbers. And then March 14th of 2020 is when they closed everything. COVID hit and facilities got closed nationwide. I mean, globally, everything got shut down for the initial, 3 months was the big one. But fitness facilities, as we know here in Canada, especially in the GTA, as well as restaurants and bars, were the biggest hit by shutdowns. So there was a 2-year span, over 2 years, that you were not allowed to operate as a gym. We kind of had a bit of a pivot having the physiotherapy clinic and chiropractors because they were deemed essential servicers. You were allowed to stay open and we could run our private coaching through the clinic. And so now people that were getting serviced by their coaches could register at the clinic, see one of the physicians or one of the therapists, once a month, and then they were allowed to come in and use the facility. However, group exercise got shut down, team exercise got shut down, basic one-on-one personal training all got shut down because you weren't allowed to do it. And so now I had this massive facility that, I had to pay rent on and still had expenses. I had all of these staff looking for work and all of this space that I couldn't use initially. And so what ended up happening is as the requirement for people to try to figure out new ways to exercise, I had a good friend and a supplier that I had been using for the last 20 years. We partnered up. We started wholesaling fitness equipment to get into people's hands so that while gyms were shut down, people could have fit and build out their own home gyms. And so we started with just basic stuff, dumbbells, benches, Olympic bars, racks, small cable machine. And then that just grew and it grew and exponentially in a very short period of time, obviously, with COVID shutting everything down to the point that, we were doing as good in numbers daily and monthly as the company was doing prior to, which took me 15 years to build. So it scaled hyper fast.
Yeah. So on one hand, it was looking awful. And on the other hand, something else came to fruition, right? Which was looking spectacular. So sticking on that, this new opportunity came. Prior to that opportunity coming, what were you thinking? Were you thinking I gotta shut down the doors? That's it?
Oh, so there are lots of times. So we were fortunate because we did get to run through the clinic and we were able to generate some revenue, not even close to what we were doing with a full facility running, but we were able to pay our bills. So it never really got doom and gloom until really coming out in 2023 when our lease came up for renewal. And so at the time, based on what we were doing, between obviously using a portion of the facility as a warehouse for equipment and sales, we still use a small portion of the facility, especially the clinic side and the personal training area, to service clients. And so we were very fortunate, more so than most facilities that have to shut down. But in that, because there is less work hours, ultimately what happens, you start to see the decline in staff. These people need to survive. They need to pay their bills. And so, at one point when we had our 22, 23 coaches, that number went down very quickly to, maybe 15 coaches and then down to 12 coaches and 10. As the numbers weren't coming out or the hours weren't being provided, these people had to shift and pivot themselves and go into new industries and find new ways to make a paycheck. And so I know lots of guys that went into firefighting, that went into police forcing, that went into construction, all things that still, humanity required these services. And so they pivoted, left the fitness industry and went off and figured out ways to get a new paycheck. And so in watching this as an operator, and then, coming out and COVID slowly, the restrictions slowly lifting, all fitness facilities, you're left with a portion of your staff, a portion of your clients, things that used to take for granted, where you'd have 250, 300 people in a boot camp program, you're now down to 50 people and trying to regrow that. And it would be an uphill battle, especially with COVID and group exercise. The last thing anyone really wanted to do coming out of COVID was jump into a room with 30 other sweaty people, breathing all over the place, sharing equipment, and everyone got spooked. And so we were kind of really digesting and evaluating what we wanted to do with this massive 15,000 square foot facility. And ultimately, what pushed us over the edge was our lease renewal. As things started to shift in other industries, it pushed people out of Class A office space and into what we had, which is, industrial. And rental rates went from $8, $9, $10 a square foot upwards of $25, $26, $27 a square foot, which just made it unaffordable at that size to run a facility that had already been downgraded in terms of what services it could provide. So we pivoted very quickly, signed a new lease at a smaller location, and then got our personal training staff operating out of there quite quickly. Let go of most of the athletic development we were doing, team training, let go of the big group exercise stuff, launched a new kind of more customized semi-private training where we would take 2, 4 to 6 people at a time and have a coach on the floor with them, more customization, but not quite the chaos of the large group, 25, 30 people. And we kind of just started that model right there. And at the same time, while that was continuing to go, the fitness portion or the equipment sales, we ended up getting into some manufacturing and obviously wholesaling, and then grew into building out home gyms. And that itself has taken off. And so we really made a big pivot from being fitness facilitators to, we can construct a model that you can exercise at your own home with the same type of equipment you get in a gym with, if needed, the customization and obviously supervision of one of our fitness professionals.
Amazing. So did you guys end up selling that gym? And what did that look like in the sell? Because you obviously saw a better opportunity doing this online branding, right? And, being a lot more lean that way, numbers looked great. So what ended up happening with that facility?
So we just released the facility, found a new person to take over the lease that wanted to jump in there and obviously utilize the build out. And we ended up taking our equipment with us. We are now leasing space for just the in-person training portion out of a third party, where the coaches go in and service our clients out of a third party facility. And then our focus now has shifted to the operation and the sales portion of the e-commerce, equipment sales, and wholesaling.
This was a long played out journey, and you had to pivot a few times, man. For somebody who's an entrepreneur, these moments make you sweat and think, all this hard work that I put into this, it's gone, right? You can probably see a lot of software engineers now, right? They're gone with AI. Those jobs they're irrelevant. So at that point in your journey, throughout those times that you had to pivot, what kept you going and what gave you that drive and that motivation to find another avenue to take?
With regards to the facilities that we had, I never had, I never thought I wasn't going to scale it at some point and either, have multiple locations and or sell it. And so there was never an option, even with all the stuff that happened. And we were very fortunate that, our first 15 years, my first 15 years, it just grew and grew and grew. We never had a year over year that we didn't, outperform the previous year. As we continued to grow and scale the size of our facilities, so did our client base, so did our revenue. And so we were very fortunate to really not have, we had internal issues with staffing, as you always do in this industry. You have abrupt turnover, and that's where I kind of really came up with the concept of, if you hire and train the right people, and you obviously provide a very fair compensation for outperforming the general population in the industry, you have something that will be self-serving, and it will ultimately not need as much care to continuously have a leaky hole in your retention system with your coaches and constantly hiring and firing. And so I guess ultimately over the long run, as we develop this new style and training and people were buying into it, we were very fortunate up until COVID to really have any big insurmountable things that really put a lot of doubt. COVID, obviously, with, not having any control over operation and what you could do and the size of your operation and how many people you could see, that was really the first time. And again, we were fortunate to have a facility, was fortunate to have contacts that I'd made over the past 20 years in this industry that allowed us to pivot very quickly and adopt this new model and a new business, and ultimately what's allowing us to thrive right now. And so I look back and say, yeah, I put 20 years into the fitness industry, but without putting that 20 years, I wouldn't have been in position to have a facility to start selling out of. I wouldn't have had a warehouse to stock equipment. I wouldn't have had the ability and the connections with the clients to, start ultimately what I was doing, building home gyms. And I ultimately wouldn't have had all the other people that have been involved that started with the personal training side of things. And now have ended up obviously in the equipment sales e-commerce space.
It's full circle. It is. Now that you're in the position where you're finding this new model, it's working, the numbers look great. What's the goal now? You're very goal driven. There's always a plan in place.
So we're now scaling into not just outfitting, we're actually building out facilities. So we have a private training facility right now that we're building out for a client who's using one of his industrial spaces for private use within his company and their employees. We do a lot of build outs now with contractors where we're going into people's homes, and ultimately space is sometimes limited if you're talking about a home gym. And so we can go in there and make it about as efficient as possible in terms of space use, but also equipment that you can use and it's universal, that obviously is significantly better than what the average person is going to buy, so that now we can get you staying at home to exercise. You don't have to run out to the gym. You don't have to share space with someone else, but we also provide the programming with that equipment. And so we make it so that you're going to get the same benefit without any of the, rollover or continuous costs of a gym membership and or a trainer for that matter, in the comfort of your own home with efficiency. And we still have people that, believe it or not, are still work from home or at least spend more time at their house. People have adopted more of a hybrid model with how they see their coaching. We have app-based training methods that we can now upload and configure programming for a person and track everything that they're doing through custom app work. And so we can provide the programming without nearly as much of the one-on-one and face-to-face contact that used to happen. And these people have the comfort of their own facilities inside their houses with up-to-date equipment that is, as good as what you would get at a gym without the big clunky machines.
That sounds great. If you had to give that little piece of advice, because you've kept yourself motivated throughout all of this, and I really think that an entrepreneur, somebody that doesn't just give up when times get tough, there's always kind of something that you'll take away from it or something that keeps you driven and focused. What is it for you?
Yeah, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be thick-skinned, because you will have more problems to solve than anyone else. And the only person that can solve them is you. And for the most part, you are on your own many of those nights, sleepless as they may be, and many of those days trying to figure out what the next step is and what the next move is. You got to be thick-skinned. But if you have an idea and a concept that you believe works and it's got a proven track record and someone else in the past has proven it, then you got to stick with your guns. It's going to take twice as long as what you initially expected it to be, and it's going to be twice as hard as you initially expect it to be. However, the payoff is also much better than you initially expect it to be as well. If you stick with it, if you're able to overcome, obviously, the growing pains initially, if you're starting off, or even if you're acquiring an existing business, learning how to be an entrepreneur is its own cup of tea, and you're sewn from a different cloth, because at the end of the day, there's no punching in and punching out. There's no taking a rest day. There's no not taking your work home with you. You got fires to put out in the middle of the night sometimes. You have fires to put out first thing in the morning. And you have everything between A and Z that you could get into with regards to running a business. That all falls on you. It's a lot of work, but at the end of the day, it's awesome because you answer to nobody. And you answer to yourself. And then again, you stick with anything that you believe that you can do. There isn't too much that people can't do. Problem is, when things get really tough, most people stop because they want the comfort of knowing that someone else will take care of it for them. And it's hard to just continuously go back and be the one that is taking care of everyone else's problems, including your own and the companies. And so, again, entrepreneurs are a very different breed of animal.
Adam, thanks for coming on, man. Thanks for sharing the story. There's a lot of people that can learn from this. I appreciate it, man.
My pleasure, my man.